Bonjour, Kinamagi Nene Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to this episode of the Social Studies Network. Today's episode, Chapter 2, West African Empires Review. The purpose of today's episode is to help us gain bearings as far as what we know about the West African empires prior to our next assessment. The Chapter 2 assessments are broken down into three different areas instead of one large test. The first area covered the tribal regions of North America, Pacific Northwest, the Southwest, the Eastern Woodlands, and the Great Plains. Then, in this part, we're going to go over to West Africa. As soon as I can move my mouse here. There we go. And specifically this region, we have an annotation tool here. This region right in here, that is West Africa. If you notice that there's a line going pretty much across, and it's where it's green down here, that is the savanna and then the rainforest areas near the Congo. The brownish, goldish area, that is the Sahara Desert. The desert region runs from the west coast of Africa, where Morocco is today, all the way across the continent and into Asia, where you can see it's still all desert here in Saudi Arabia, and it looks to still be dry even as you move over to Iran and going further. So we know this is an area that's life is going to revolve in an arid climate. Down here, there's some grass, so we have some opportunities for agriculture, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The third area will be talking about the Columbian Exchange and explorers, where Europeans started coming south first into Africa, realizing that they wanted to start looking for other routes. So they're going to start also going west. And then eventually they're going to be stopping here to pick up people and then going over here. So I wanted to start with a PowerPoint. We're going to use several different tools today. It's going to be a more disjointed episode because of the fact that we are reviewing for an assessment, and I want to give you background information that you may not have remembered, just to make sure you're ready when we take the quiz. We can see here some drawings of where the empires or kingdoms were. The Songhai Kingdom was very much the largest, and it stretched way out to here. The Mali one was the second largest, and Ghana was the smallest. So as time moved longer, closer to the present, these kingdoms were bigger. As you can see, 11th century, 14th century, 15th century. Ghana was the first great trader kingdom. Gold and salt were the key entities. They had plenty of gold, so they traded out for salt. A lot of farming communities. So that's, if I ask you about what was life like, farming is a big part here. Strong rulers. It says no laws to govern with, but I kind of find that questionable. Rulers could also serve as religious leaders, the judge, military commander as well. Well-trained army. And they also had silver and iron ore. Iron ore is pretty important as far as making some tools. You can see here's Ghana, and you can see in this map of Africa on the right that there were other empire and kingdoms. We're focusing here in West Africa. Over on the east side, you can see Egypt, Kush, Ethiopia, Axum. Those are pretty important ones, but just not what we're focusing on today. They did also trade cloths and weapons. They were traders who carried the products across the desert. Camels are a heavily used resource. Um, if you note that, about 3 miles per hour they walk. It could take 2 months to get someplace. And that they were literacy was growing in this at this time. People are learning to read. Keep in mind that in large swaths of Europe, very few people read. You see an image from this person's PowerPoint of what a caravan might look like. The king collected taxes and had a lot of control, but that's typical in a kingdom where the king is in charge. Um, they did have smaller rulers to rural areas, and that's true even in the United States. We have a president who is in charge of the whole thing, and then governors for the states. Although we have in the states much more sovereignty than these territories would have under a kingdom. Ghana was eventually weakened by war um, and also by inefficient leadership. They didn't have a lot of cultural unity. Culture is a very important thing for maintaining a nation over time, whether they have borders or not. And once they fell, we got Mali. And you see some key cities here, including Timbuktu. So we're looking here in the 12th, 13th century going on. That's really the 13th century in 1240. They extended from the Malian coast to Timbuktu. Again, we're trading gold and salt. And this system included each village had its own ruler that sent money to the king of Mali. So much more of a city-state style of government. You see in the brown is where Mali was, right on that edge between the forest, the savanna, and then the deserts to the north. Mansa was a term that meant ruler. Sundiata was for one of the early major rulers. Reorganized government, moved the government westward and provided more trading posts. So again, we see trade's important. Mansa Musa was probably the wealthiest man to ever live. He doubled the size of kingdom, strong central government, took the pilgrimage to Mecca. He was an adherent of Islam and spent so much money along the way that he weakened the value of gold in Egypt for a dozen years. Unfortunately, after he passed, the next rulers were not as strong. Civil war breaks out, and the end for them. And you see there's no clear line of succession, poor leadership, and things went bad. And then you see Songhai will be the orange that takes over in the Niger River Valley. So land is very fertile due to yearly flooding. So this is a good agricultural area. It was an Islamic kingdom, benefiting from the trade routes. Askia the Great expanded the kingdom, creating a professional army. And he ruled for 30 years, which is a pretty long time. And you see here where the Niger River in blue. Even today, that's an important resource to people living in that region. And they still actually even have military boats to patrol it. And that was true then. So this gives rise to what one of the first navies in the region is. When you think of a navy, you think boats. And most times you don't need a navy when you're a landlocked country. Well, when you have a major river, it's very important to be able to protect your trade on it. By 1600, things had gone south there. Weakened leaders takes away. So let's leave this one. I have another resource for you. This comes from an older social studies curriculum we used to use as part of the review. So again, you see the different vegetation regions, the different empires. Salt for gold is another thing. It's too far here. We're not going to look at every image in here. They did leave a written history. Oral history is still a huge thing through this period of history. And as you know, we have an oral tradition as well. Um, there were drawings on maps that showed how powerful Mansa Musa was and how rich he was. So we are able to use that. So let's page down a little bit. I want to catch a few things, but not necessarily all of it. Also, vocabulary that's helpful. The vegetation region is a region characterized by the kind of plants that grow there. Empire is a group of kingdoms or nations taken over and ruled by one leader. Savannah is a region with tall grass and a few scattered trees. So I picture the Great Plains would be similar. Tropical rainforest is an evergreen forest in a tropical area with lots of rain and hot, warm or very hot weather. We have temperate rainforests here in North America and the Pacific Northwest that we covered a little earlier, but it's not as hot there, so we don't call that tropical. Islam is one of the major religions of the world, and a Muslim is someone who follows that religion. Let's keep going here. Riyat, and a historian and storyteller responsible for keeping the oral history of an area. That's pretty important to know too. That was in there. We saw salt for gold. That was a huge trade. I know it seems weird to us in our 2020 brains to think, well, I got salt. I got like 3 packages of salt sitting in my cupboards, and McDonald's gives it out. And I don't have to give them gold. They're free. Well, we have refrigeration. They didn't. So it was very important to be able to preserve your food. Otherwise, you starve to death, and that doesn't make things very good for your kingdom. Regions of Africa, this will be a part of your assessment. Not this particular map, but knowing where they are. You see the purple up here is North Africa. And when you put letters on here, estimated is fine. I see that they have the old unified Sudan as all purple, but if you had drawn across the line, I would not have freaked out on you. These are estimates, really. West Africa, the green region here, and that's the one we've been focusing on. Even though you could argue, well, this country here is in West Africa, it's right on the West Coast, and I'd understand that. In the middle, we have Central Africa. Down here is the rainforest, up here the desert, so it's a pretty diverse region. On the East Coast, we got East Africa in the gray. So that runs up from the Horn of Africa, Somalia, sticking out here. We're going down all the way to Madagascar. And in the red, we have Southern Africa, which largely still includes the country of South Africa. So let's see what else we can find on this document. You can see a list of countries. It's an outdated map. You can see that Ghana was the smallest, Mali, then Songhai. And that's also there's a slight overlap as one took over for the other. You can see desert, grasslands, rainforests, and that's true throughout the continent. We have some trade routes here. And you can see that these routes would connect cities throughout the continent. And once you get up to places like Cairo and Tunis, you could trade directly into Europe using ship. And that's what they would do. Gold mines to the south, salt mines to the north. So the answers. What led to its growth? Iron working that led to producing more food and making better weapons. Leaders used taxation to raise money. Control of trade routes. Drought was an issue for its decline. When things don't grow well, you don't have as much food. Food scarcity becomes an issue. People get unhappy, and they might overthrow the government. Mali, we saw the powerful kings, control of trade routes. Afterwards, attacks by outsiders, rebellions by the kingdoms, loss of control over the trade. And Songhai almost became too large for it to control. at that time. And then eventually the Moroccans came and said, bye-bye. I'm looking to see if there's any important information that I haven't already touched on. See an image here of Mansa Musa. Um, I'm doing a quick scan as I scroll through here to point out anything. See some artwork. So art is a huge thing. Um, King adorns himself like a woman, wearing necklaces around his neck and bracelets on his arms, and he puts on a high cap decorated with gold and wrapped in a turban of fine cloth or cotton. Holds an audience in a dome pavilion around which stand 10 horses covered with gold embroidered materials. That description from an early Muslim geographer, Ali Bakri, kind of shows how rich they were, really. They started having gold hats. The final piece today, I'm going to close that out. I just want to talk to you real quick about Shanghai and what life was like. These cities were trade centers. Um, Picture like a regular city today, housing built in stone and many having large public square for regular markets and at least one mosque. Around this core was floating suburban population living in modern reed houses. So you have your inner city, and then outside of that is that those suburbs. That's something that actually exists here. Um, that's not always found throughout the world, uh, especially at this time. Nowadays, it's a thing. Back then, it wasn't as much of a thing. So that shows a pretty high degree of centralization in cities. Rural communities, meanwhile, continue to be wholly dependent on agriculture, which means farming. So you would probably talk about, if I asked about their lives, they farm. Some live in cities and do trade. In a lot of ways, it starts to sound a little bit like life today. Maybe different tools, but similar ideas. Um, and we saw that the Shanghai government was more centralized. They kept the power. They like in the United States, be like keeping the power within Washington D.C. So let's go ahead and stop that share. So when we get to the quiz day, which let me look at the dates here, I was on Tuesday, the 20th. It will be opened already as of 8 a.m. tomorrow morning when you come to school. But make sure that you stop and think about what was life like. Don't rush through quizzes. These aren't long assessments. They're short ones to kind of make sure you understand a little bit about where are the regions of Africa and what was life like. That's the key focus. If you have any questions, reach out to me at mireland@psychchipschool.net, attend our live stream or office hours at 2 p.m. This quiz should be completed before Friday, if preferably Sunday at the ultimate. But you're welcome to do it as soon as you're ready. And then I'll give you some feedback because in the final week of the quarter, there will be opportunities to redo parts in order to bring those any twos up to a 3, because we do standards-based grading, and we want to make sure that you're leaving SCA with a huge breadth of knowledge that'll help you be successful in future classes. Well, without further ado, I'm going to wish you all a Minnow Gizigad. Bamapi.